Hello, everyone. Welcome to Create with Chris. Today, I'm going to be sharing not one, not two, but three different ways to create pine trees very easily with acrylic paint. So stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss this. I have with me today Lindsay over to my right, and she's going to be manning all the questions. Please, if you have comments or questions, put them in the comment box and we'll be happy to answer them. So I had a request. It's been a couple weeks, Lindsay, hasn't it, for pine trees. And I love creating pine trees, and I've created them several different ways, but I'm going to share my favorite way. And then I was playing around and I came up with a couple different ways that I think are just as fun. Each one has its own look. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I am using the Deco Art acrylic paint. And I just have a white surface. I thought this would be fun to just kind of do demos on. I'm using black green paint. I thought we'd just get right down to the nitty gritty. And I'm going to start out with, these are my fantastic filberts, and they have a little extra length on them, which is going to allow me to add a little extra painting time without having to reload, which I think is a benefit no matter what type of painting you do. I did get some moisture on my brush, so it is not dry, but it's not drippy wet. And I'm just going to load both sides of my brush as opposed to just one side. So I have a fair amount of paint in my brush, but as you can see, it's still razor thin. The length of the bristles allows me to add more paint without adding more bulk, if that makes sense. And to create the pine tree, I always start with the vertical trunk, and you can either paint it or just tap it down. And let's just go ahead. I thought I would start with a summer pine tree. I don't paint summer pine trees nearly as much as in the wintertime with snow on them, but they always have just a little bit of a top on it. And I'm going to use the chisel edge. Actually, if I use my chisel edge to touch down, I get this perfect little half moon shape. If I pounce it a little bit harder, I'm going to get a little bit of a ragged. I'm going to keep more of an angle on it. And you can see I get more of a raggedy bottom on it. And this is what I'm using to create my pine branches. So I'm just going to start, and I'm not going to touch down just a very light touch, almost just a little bit. And I start in the middle, work to the left, work to the right, so that I don't have, I've seen pine trees where they have even rows all the way down. And I just want to kind of build it out. Some people start in the middle and work up. I kind of like to start at the top because that way I know exactly where the width of my tree is going. And I'm just not filling it in super heavy. This is one of many layers. And the more comfortable you become with tapping these rows of pine branches in, basically the quicker you'll be able to add those. And I'm just going to kind of go up and thicken that middle up just a little bit. If I'm happy with that shape, I'm just going to paint. I like to put a little shadow down there. So I'm just going to add that in with the darker paint right now. Going in now with a little bit of pine green. I'm going to lighten that green shade up, and I hope it shows up well on camera. Sometimes when you have the darker values of color, it's hard to differentiate on camera. Now, if I wanted to, I could bump down to a smaller filbert to create the top of the tree, but I'm just going to stay on the toe of the brush and just kind of tap that in. I hope you can see how much greener that has become. And this is a summer tree, so I do want it to be fairly green. And we'll just tap that in there. It always is kind of magical to watch it go from a rough structure to filling in and becoming very realistic. You know what I should do? Let's just do a little bit of this down around the base of the tree as well. This is my grass. And plantation pine is fairly translucent, so I can go right over that dark green and it starts to build a nice shadow area. This is eucalyptus leaf, kind of a strange color, but it is I shouldn't say strange color, it's kind of a blue-green color so that I'm not getting that lime green pine tree. These are blue spruce, by the way. At least that's what I'm calling. And you can see when I put this on, it starts to transform the tree into a just kind of skipping across, creating layers, allowing that darker background color to create that shadow effect. And I'm just kind of tapping down. And you can I like to watch where I'm going so I can create layers that make sense instead of just rows. The branches stick out. So I've got a branch here, I can follow that all the way out. If I've got a branch here, I can follow it all the way out. And we'll put some down here on the ground. And that builds it up. I think when creating pine trees, the shades of green, you can't go wrong with the colors you select. I've done pine trees in purples and blues and greens. So if you're consistent with the graduation of colors and build it up so that it becomes very layered as far as the shadows and the highlights, it's going to work. And I'm adding a little bit, kind of played around with highlights. I did one at home and I used matcha green. It was really lime colored. So I thought I'm just going to, this is baby duck. I think it just, in my mind, looks like sunshine. And I'm just going to splash that on there. And I'm a little more particular with my placement on this. So I'm thinking where the sun's going to hit from the top. And it's morning, so the sun's coming up on the east over here. Oh, this is west, and it's going toward nighttime. Okay. Now my sunlight's going to be stronger on the center and on the left, but I will add a little bit over here so that it doesn't look like the tree's divided and flat. Just a light touch. I don't want big, heavy sections. If I go down too heavy, I'm just going to create a blob. And there's my little ground there. I can go back and add some more greenery. I'm going to add just a little bit of, and then I would go in and add some little grasses, but that's going to create the look of that pine tree. I think probably most of what I create with pine trees is in the winter time, and that's basically the same concept, but I'm going to change my colors quite a bit. Still starting out with black green. Another good color to start out with is Payne's Gray, and that gives you more of that blue tone. I'm kind of sticking with this because that's what I have on my palette. And again, I'm just going to kind of create that trunk. You can tap it in or just so that it's the main structure on which to build this. Add a couple little topper ones here. I can always go back and add more, right? But it's hard to take off if it's too much. And I'm just tapping that on to create that look of a pine tree. If I push harder, if my tap is stronger, I'm going to get bigger little branches and they're a little more sculptured, or the curve is a little bit stronger. So I'm just going to keep less of a curve on it, tap that down, and create that look of the pine tree. We want to get that little shadow down there. I'll tap that in. Looking just for basic structure at this point. I still want this to be a green pine tree, even though it's in winter covered with snow. Going back with plantation pine, such a nice color to add that greenness without hiding all that beautiful darkness that's on there. Just kind of makes a nice in-between blend from light to dark. Tapping that in. I don't have to have it on every layer. I'm just, I don't want to say randomly, but very carefully pouncing it around, loosely. Maybe that's a good word. And now it's a green pine tree. And I want to make sure that I get a little bit of snow on there. So I'm just going to dry it. If I start adding my snow at this point, it's going to turn into green snow. If I'm painting trees that have shades of blue in them, it won't matter. I can just pick up a lighter color and it all kind of works together. Going in with a little bit of thicket. I'll add another layer in here. Thicket is such a beautiful color. It's kind of an earthy blue-green. I don't know, does DecoArt have that in the green family or the blue family?
I'm sure.
I don't know either.
I will look.
And I'm just going to start adding some little more structure. It's starting to thicken the tree up a little bit. And I want that definitely. When I'm doing this, I'm following the contour of the tree, but I'm not going clear out to the edges. I'm going to have snow on the edges, and that just helps to make that tree very, very strong. This is a heavy snowfall. We don't want any branches breaking. Usually when I add snow, I start with a snow shade color, which is going to be whatever color my theme is. If it's on the blue greens, I'll add a little bit of blue. If it's more in the purples, I'll add a light purple.
They put it in the greens.
Okay. Well, it says thicket. That's kind of like a thicket of trees.
Right next to forest green.
Okay. So this is considered a green in DecoArt's family. And my paint has not been shaken for a while. Such a fun way to create pine trees. And I think if you do any kind of a winter project, when you pop in a few pine trees, it really makes a nice little scene. If you have any comments, let Lindsay know. She's over here.
So we have people joining us today from, Tennessee, Iowa, Bogota, Colombia.
Wow.
Windy, Michigan, just popped in. Kelly says, thanks for doing these. I always struggle with them looking right. Also, regular tree branches with leaves, like springtime is a struggle. Would love to see a how-to on those.
Actually, Wendy, someone else asked about trees, regular trees and branches. So that's going to be an upcoming video. Again, when I put the snow on, I don't want to pile it evenly all the way around. I don't want to have it on the left. I don't want to have it on the right. So I can put a little bit out here on the side. And I did forget to say my intro. Normally I say, hey, everyone, let us know where you're viewing from. And I didn't do that today.
Rosie just joined us from sunny Northern California.
Oh, man. Do you have a guest bedroom? Because it's cold here.
And Christy popped in from Michigan.
Well, it's no warmer in Michigan. I do know that. Okay, let's add a little bit of snow on this tree. I should have, while I'm in here, just put a little bit of snow on the ground.
Rosie said, come on over.
Oh, man. That's very tempting. I have a husband and a dog. That might be a problem. Okay, I've added a little bit of blue on the ground as well. Now I want to go in and start piling my snow on. And I'm going to bump down to a number 8 because up here I don't want it to be clumpy. I want to have a little more control. Loading my filbert, and this is the number 8 filbert. And I hope you can see this. I did a white background and I thought afterwards I probably should have made it a little darker for contrast. All right, white is one of those colors that becomes a little bit more intense with each layer. So I'm just going to put in my first layer, and I want to have snow everywhere, but this is my west and the snow blows in from the northwest, so it's going to definitely be stronger on this side. So I'm going to add some down here, more so where those branches are going to be heavier and more piled. Again, this is the first application of snow. So as I go back and add another layer, it's going to be just a little bit more intense, and it's going to stand out a little more. Now right here, I'm not real crazy because it's a solid thing, so I'm just going to go in with a little bit of black green and tuck a little shadow up under there, and that's going to break that up so it's not such a strong lump of paint. Let this dry. And if the filbert seems a little bit cumbersome for laying the paint on, you can definitely go back with a round, but I find out that the round creates too much of a solid area and it doesn't look as fluffy as I can get with my filbert. And I can just go in there and start. You can see how much whiter, brighter this is. I can add little bits. I don't want just a totally white tree, but it has been a big snowstorm. I can pop that in there. And lay that snow in there. I see some areas that just have nothing on them, so I can go back and kind of take a look at what I've done and pile that snow on. I want it to look heavy laden, but also I want it to look fluffy. Just go in with a little bit of Snow White. This is not going to show up very well, but I can tuck some snow around the tree. Create that look of piles of snow. I like that little shadow to show up, but I don't want it to be like a puddle. And if it becomes a little bit too heavy, I can go back and add a little more shading or highlighting, whatever is needed. Add a little bit. And I'm just going back again to brighten up that snow. And as you're painting, keep an eye on the overall tree so that you can tell what needs more paint and what does not. I'm going to add a little more up here. I don't think it'll show. Lots of layers, lots of color of the snow. Just that easy to drop that little tree in there. After I let it dry, I can go back. I did one yesterday, and I'll share that with you. It was much darker. I probably could have lightened the snow up a little bit, but you can see how it looks very frosty and very snowy. I want to add some background trees. Just going to go in with a lighter color. And I love to do background trees because these are so very what's the word? Not detailed. Just kind of add those in. I want to go with the shape of the tree. I'm thinning down. This is laurel. Thinning down the paint. I want it very loose. And this does not need to be very distinct. I'm just kind of putting the hint of pine trees back there. Just kind of tapping that shape in, and I can add several in there, different heights. This is just a hint of color. And just a hint of a tap and a slide, and you just want that general shape of the pine trees. Again, just make sure that you don't have even rows. Even though they're distant, they're still going to have their own specific little shapes to them. Very softly, very quietly, I can add those in. If I want to add one kind of in the middle, going in with a little bit of thinned thicket, and I'll just pop a bigger one in here. And I can just see how quickly I can just kind of jump back and forth. I always start in the middle, go out to the side, and add those trees in there. This is a stronger color, so it is going to come to the foreground a little bit more. Let's add another one over here. Always start with that center branch. You can always go back and add more saturation of color, but I just want to, if it's too strong, I need a little more water. Think watercolor painting. And I can add that in there. Just kind of skip it back and forth. I'm not making these trees solid and heavy. I just want them to be that indication of those background trees. Look how that just builds that little forest very nicely. Let's put one right there. Just a little bit stronger. I know many of you have watched Bob Ross build his trees or create his trees. He always uses a fan brush. That works for bigger trees, but when working in smaller areas, to use a fan brush is a little bit, you're just working with a tiny part of the brush. It's a little bit awkward. I think that's just going to add a hint of snow on here with the spa blue. And that's just going to add just a little bit of frost back there. And I do load my brush a bit because I'm not putting much paint on and I have such a tiny amount. Sometimes it doesn't even show up very well. And I'd rather go back and get more than have too much. And you can see I'm still using a very sharp chisel edge, just touching, let's say the toe, left side toe of my brush, putting a little bit of frost on there. Is that showing up, Lindsay?
Slightly, yeah, I can see it.
I think you can see the difference in color, but it's so much fun to add those shades of different greens in the background. I'll put a little bit of shadow around this tree. And then I can go back and add my snow on top of that. I'll let that dry for now, but it's a very quick way. I think I added way too much snow in here, and I can just go in and kind of break it up a little bit with some of the black green if I think that's too heavy or if it's become too solid. It's just very easy to go in and break that up with just a touch of black green. You get carried away, then you get a little too much, and then you need to go back with a little bit of white. But I don't think there's anything that can't be like fixed up. Is that a good fix it up or enhanced? Just take a look at it and see if it's too heavy, too light, too solid, too dark. And then to correct it, you would just go back and brighten that up with a little bit of more. It's all about contrast. If you like what you're seeing, please let me know. Don't forget to hit the bell and subscribe. That way you won't miss out on future videos. I think right now NAMTA is going on in New Orleans. And is it New Orleans? Okay, and DecoArt's coming out with quite a bit of new products. So keep a heads up for we always like new things, don't we? So there's a little frosty tree. I was playing around yesterday. I made some bigger trees, and this is the same style. And just adding the layers of color and building the trees up. Such a fun, easy way to create. And then I was thinking, well, what if you don't want to use a filbert brush? So I thought it would be fun to see what I could do with a flat brush. And I'd not done this before, so hopefully I can do a halfway decent. I'm just going to make a small tree. And I'm using a number 4 flat. Again, I always want to start with my trunk because I want to know exactly where my tree is going to be placed. And I thought this is going to be more of a swish. So I'm starting up on the point and I'm just pulling it down. And loading it and just pulling it out. And I do a little bit of a flip. This is, I think, what I would consider more of a traditional shaped tree. You know how we always did the triangle trees? But I didn't want it to be, again, even rows all the way across. And this is just on the flat of the brush. My paint is fairly thin, and I'm just pulling it out with a little bit of a flip. And that's going to give me on the tips just a little bit of a ragged. And I thought, well, that's kind of cute. I kind of like that. It gives me a little bit of a different shape. But I want a little bit of a point on the top. And then I thought, well, if I could do that, maybe I could go back with the blue. Let's give this a quick dry. And I'm just going to start adding that snow in. I just have to be a little careful with this top one because that's where it's really tiny. And I'm just swishing in a little bits of this blue to add some. This is a really quick tree, but I thought it turned out fun. So I may do some of these. Like the way that looked, and then I can just go back, give it another quick dry, and go back with Snow White. Every time I load my brush, I load it well, keep that sharp chisel edge, and keep that paint nice and flat on the tip. What you see is what you get. So if you have a blob of paint on the tip of your brush, when you go to paint down, you're going to get a blob of paint.
Cheryl and Kathy said the trees are beautiful.
I love to paint pine trees. I think they're so much fun.
And Rosie says that she loves your brushes. She's an ankle girl, and your brushes are fabulous to paint with.
Thank you. All of my brushes have just a little bit more length on them, and it just makes sense to me if I want a longer stroke and more continuity. If I have a longer bristle, I'm going to get what I want without having to reload and every single time. Very simple. It took like 2 minutes. Probably takes longer for the paint to dry, but it's definitely, it's a pine tree. It's definitely frosty, and I could go back and add a little more brightness, whiteness on it, let it dry. So that was using the flat of the brush, and I thought, okay, so if I go in with the same number 4 flat, and I'm going to just use the toe of the brush, not the flat, but the toe, and I'm just going to pull it out this way. And create a look. There we go. Need just a little more moisture. Whenever the paint starts to drag or you're not getting a very good response on the brush stroke, you need more water, more paint, something to make that paint flow just a little bit easier. This one looks just a little more wispy than the flat of the brush. But I think it's still kind of a neat way to look. I'm just going to poke that tip up just a little bit higher. And that is just the bare bones. I could have made it a little shorter or longer. Going back in with plantation pine, I want this just a little more green. Again, I'm just using the toe of my brush to pull that out. And it's just amazing to see what this little bit of color does to this pine tree. Just on the toe. And I'm making sure that I have enough paint on there that it will change the color. So even though it's a little bit translucent, I can tell that the tone of the tree is much more green. And while we're in there, just for fun, I'm going to pick up some of that thicket and just kind of, thicket is just a little more opaque, so I can start to build the layers with this. And I don't want to just go down the center and pan out on each side. I want to have branches that are in layers. And when I start to put the snow in, that will definitely be where that will show up probably the most. Make it just a little bit wider down there. Going back with the Spa Blue. I don't have a lot of paint on my brush, so when I go in to pull these down, I can really hone into those little sections. And if you get too aggressive and push too hard, you get the heavier blobs, which I don't want. I'm looking for the overall aesthetic of the tree to see if it's starting to look like it has layers and divisions, which I think it's starting to show up now. Going back with a little bit of white Loading my brush well, keeping that chisel edge. Just going to use the toe of that to start laying that snow on there. And I have the blue on there, so I'm just, because these are bigger areas or bigger splotches of paint, I can go in there and just really start to. This one that was so solid, I can go in there and kind of break that up. Now it looks like light and dark patches of snow. And leave that dark in there. That really shows that distance. See how I can just really build those areas up. Add that snow in there. And it's going to take, with the white, just a few layers to really brighten that up. And you can see, is it showing up, Lindsay, the brightness?
Yeah.
I really want some whiteness there. Ooh, that looks like a nice heavy branch. If you have a darker background, you can really start to focus on those side edges a little bit more, kind of. So that's another fun way to build the tree. Just going to go back here, and now that that is dry, I can go in here and brighten these up. With the flat of the brush, it's just a little bit blockier and stronger, not quite as fluffy and soft as when using the toe of the brush. You have a little more control and then a little more areas. But just remember, I have the brush, and this is again with the filbert. Just go ahead and kind of walk that brush out. Start in the middle, create those layers. Pretend you're Bob Ross.
Happy little trees.
Happy, happy trees. We have some. So just look for the basic shape of the tree, and it doesn't have to be solid. And I think a lot of times we look for that solidness to kind of fill the tree in. A little bit of plantation pine, kind of walk that out. Just wanted to do one real quick so you can see how quickly you can lay those in. Of course, the bigger they are, it's going to take a little more dry time and application time, but overall, we'll just add this in. Start adding that spa blue in there. Very light touches. And you can see how it starts to build. You can see where you need to add more, but just that quickly. And then a little bit of white on there. This tree is going to look fantastic. So these are the three types of trees, filbert and flat, whichever is your preference. But I think the secret to making really pretty pine trees is to not be too fussy. If you have a little bit of a shaky hand, your trees are going to look awesome. Because it's that little bit of bounce, and add that on there. It's just really. So what else would you like me to share with you? We're looking for upcoming videos on how to, techniques that are being requested. So I can take requests, and we can go ahead and put a few on the schedule. So I know there's a lot of different techniques that are going to be fun to do. And I think there's so many techniques that are really super easy that we make way too hard. So this is a little ornament I created with the background trees very easily. And then on this pine tree, all I did was put some little spotlights of Snow White on that to brighten it up. This is another one. It was just a real quiet background with trees. I think trees really dress up a winter scene very, very easily. So, and they're super easy to do. So I hope that you learned a few new tips, tricks, and techniques to make painting trees a lot easier. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to try to be on every Tuesday with either a free class video or a live video. And I have a lot of techniques lined up. So we've got a lot planned in the future. Please subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss out. We have a lot going on. What else is going on, Lindsay?
You will have a new design come out next week.
Oh, yeah.
On Tuesday with an accompanying video.
Yes.
Is that next
Squeeze the
week?
day.
Is that
Yes.
next week? Or am I a week ahead? No, that is next
week.
April is next week.
Mhm.
Yeah. So next week.
And it's a real fun video. It's Squeeze the Day. So when will the pattern be released?
Probably the day before on Monday. Yeah.
So get your pattern. The video is pre-recorded, so you'll be able to watch it anytime. But again, it's on my YouTube channel, Create with Chris. And I've got a lot of designs in the works. And we've got a lot going on here at Covert Distributing. A lot of new stencils. Jen and Lindsay are doing semi-pro stenciling classes on Thursdays. So if you're wondering about stenciling or if you want to get a friend interested in painting, believe me, these girls 2 years ago wouldn't even pick up a paintbrush. You should see them now. They're doing fantastic.
Speaking of Jen, she's requested more about choosing colors for shading and highlighting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I do have a color wheel class coming up as well. So that might be a good one to go kind of hand in hand. We have Christmas Unwrapped is our year subscription program. It is so much fun. We've had been very creative, and it's packed full of ornaments and freebies and gifts. It goes out 4 times a year.
The next shipment will go out in June, but if you sign up now, you'll get the first shipment, which is the gingerbreads, sent out with your subscription.
That way you won't miss out. So you'll get everything. If you sign up now, you'll get the gingerbread. If you sign up the next subscription or next shipment, you'll get the gingerbread and
the next one that's a secret.
I can't say
that Chris hasn't painted yet, but I have.
It's finished up here. It's ready up here. All I have to do is put the brush to it. So yeah, it'll be a good one too. What else is going on, Lindsay? We have tons of new stencils that are coming out weekly. Just really fun stencils. So you have to be sure to check that out.
And then Rosie said she just received the gingers.
Oh, have fun, Rosie. I know you're going to enjoy painting them. Anything else then?
There are some new brushes on the way.
Oh, yeah.
They'll be here in June.
June,
yeah. New Chris Hoy design brushes coming in June.
I've been working on those for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Oh, they're awesome. Yeah. So we'll tell you more about those later, but anything that's going to make my painting life a little bit easier, I'm all about, and I think you're going to love them too. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me today and Lindsay, and hopefully you picked up a few new tips and tricks to create pine trees. I would say in a nutshell, just let it be loose and try different colors because they do some amazing things. As always, remember a little bit of paint makes a big difference. So back off on that heavy load of paint and just let the brush create the magic, and you just sit back there and steer the ship. So, all righty. We will appreciate everyone joining us today, and we look forward to our next adventure together. Thank you, and bye-bye.